So, aloha everyone. We are here as the Empowerment Roundtable, and this is our second episode. And today we're going to be talking about our view on feminism, what feminism means to us, and then also discussing a topic around self care and what we're doing at this time with so many different things going on. So, just wanted to take a second, share that with you, and open it up for discussion as there's a lot of different points of view. So, Magdalena, do you want to get started on what your idea of feminism is to you?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I think for me, it's really important when I talk about feminism to identify as an intersectional feminist. So it's a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And what it really comes down to is that not all inequalities are created equal, and that we really need to look at oppression from all the identities that an individual can hold, and how these oppressive systems impact them not just based on like gender or socioeconomic status or race or sexual orientation, but how all these overlapping identities are impacted by oppressive systems. And that's really important to me because I am a woman of color. And I think a lot of times when we talk about being a feminist, gender is the first thing that comes to mind, right? But to me, I can never separate my race with my gender, and how I experience the world and how the world experiences me and the opportunities I've had or the lack of opportunities I've had are all connected to both my race and gender, and also social status, immigration status. Um, so that's how I identify. And those are the conversations I have with people when we talk about what does it mean to be a feminist. I think there's a lot of times a misconception that it's about women's rights. For me, because I also utilize a decolonial approach, it's about community, like my community, because just because you're not female identified does not mean that you haven't experienced, what a patriarchal oppressive system looks like. Um, so it's about my community and how they're impacted by these oppressive systems. Um, I think it's also important because as a cisgender woman, it would be easy for me to only focus on the issues that impact, women. But being a feminist is about, equity, and that means for trans folks, for queer folks, um, keeping that in mind, and how when I view issues, that I'm not just viewing it from the lens of a cisgender woman, but also viewing it from other folks with different sexual orientations or gender identities. So yeah, that's how I identify, and that's usually when I am, you know, voting or making a decision on a topic is through that lens, through the lens of like how does this impact people from like their diverse identities that they hold, and not just gender. And I think it's important because that's also how we, I think, eradicate patriarchy, is understanding that the patriarchal system doesn't just impact women, but it impacts men, it impacts people of color, it impacts queer folks, trans folks, immigrants. Um, so really understand is going to be crucial in the work that we do.
Yeah, I love your explanation. Rika, did you want to add? Did you have any other thoughts?
I think Magdalena explained it perfectly well, and I agree with her. Like, I think the only true way of the only way that makes sense for me in feminism is intersectional feminism, because one person has a gender, but they have race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and all those things. And we need to understand um, equality and equity in the lens of these. And we need all these identities to understand how discrimination and privilege work and how the patriarchal system works. So I really, really like intersectional feminism as well. And just about feminism, like in my cultures, the like misconception about feminism many times is that it's about hating men and stuff like that. which we know is nonsense, but some people still perpetuate these narratives about feminism. And I would like to say that's not true. Feminism is not about hating men, it's about equality and equity, among all people, among all genders. Yeah, so that's just something I add to this, but yeah, it has been explained really well.
Yes, she does a very good job of explaining it. I have very little to add to the explanation. I too see myself in the same vein. I would say that when it comes to feminism, I think that there's a lot of stereotypes of what it is to be a feminist, and definitely I don't fit that stereotype. So I think that it is really important when you are speaking to someone, you're discussing feminism. There's a lot of assumptions that can be made, just like there's a lot of assumptions that can be made when it comes to race or gender orientation, or anything along those lines. So it's important to ask before assuming. So for a lot of people, they might look at me, the way that I dress, or certain things that I do, my mannerisms, and not consider me a feminist. Um, but for me, I do consider myself a feminist. I'm very passionate about supporting women. I also think that there are different ways to support women and still honor how you see and view your issues, such as, we've had some different stuff come up in the news lately, where we have a woman appointed to Supreme Court, and uh, in on one side you could be excited to see a woman in that power position. On the other side, if that person is not valuing the same things that you do, and also it perpetuates more of a patriarchal system, then it can be very disempowering, and it also can be very damaging to moving the bar. So supporting women in these power roles who have similar views, who support women's rights, who support racial equity and LGBTQ rights. Those are different things that, for me, I definitely value as a woman, as a feminist. So that's something that I also wanted to just open up the conversation on, because I think that we discuss these different topics and we talk about feminism, and a lot of people, um, there's a lot of questions and a lot of assumptions that are made. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's also why it's so important to deconstruct what feminist being a feminist means. I think there is an assumption that there's like a one size fits all of being a feminist, right? Um, and I know I've had experiences where I meet individuals, because right, being a feminist is not like, again, going to that, being a feminist is not only for women, right? Just like how men can be feminists, women can also uphold patriarchal ideologies that are harmful to other women and other identities that don't fit that, white male cisgender heterosexual norm. And so I know I've encountered situations where I met women that they identify as a feminist. We start having open dialogue about different issues, and it quickly becomes clear that we don't have the same beliefs, right? Or we don't view the issues the same way. And again, that goes back, going back to this idea of being a feminist, and it's only about like this one specific topic, which is gender, right? And not thinking about all the other identities that people hold. I think like one of the, I know like a topic right now in regards to this is like sex work, right? I've met folks that identify as feminists who are anti-sex work. And you know, like I said, I identify as a feminist, and to me, being a feminist means that people have a right to choose the life that they want to live, right? That it's your right to choose. So to me, dictating how a woman or an individual, their what job they can hold is part of oppression, and it's part of this patriarchal ideology, right? That we have a right to tell someone else how they can live their life, or what type of job is considered respectable and what isn't. So again, I think that's why it's really important to deconstruct it and not just make the assumption that all feminists, have the same views on all these issues. We're seeing it right now in the United States with the appointed Supreme Court judge, where a lot of people have seen it as a win for women that we have another woman, in the Supreme Court. But if this woman upholds patriarchal systems and ideologies, that's not being a feminist, and that is not a win for women. So being a feminist doesn't mean automatically I'm a woman, I'm a feminist, right? You have to actively want to, you know, destroy these patriarchal um, systems that continue oppressing not just women but other folks. Um, when we think of issues like abortion, we were having this conversation about like, if you're only looking at it from a gender perspective, maybe that's why people like Amy Barrett can say she is pro-choice, right? Because she's looking at it from a cisgender white cisgender heterosexual white, lower or with a higher like education, from a higher or like a more stable economic background, right? So the reality is, if we criminalize abortion, she will still have, I mean, wealthy women have had access to abortions even before, right? Because it's not about just the gender, it's about money, and they have access to doctors, right? Or leaving the country and going to countries where it's legal to still access it. So it's not just a women's, like, we can't just look at it from a women's lens, but it's like, how does criminalizing abortion impact women of color, right? How does it impact women from lower socioeconomic statuses that won't have the access to have a private doctor to their home, right, and perform the abortion, or be able to fly out of the country. And I think that's important to note, because then we'll have people that come and say, well, look, women like Amy, she is pro-choice. So, if a woman's pro-choice and is trying to criminalize abortion, then it should be fine. But again, we're only looking at this issue from a lens of gender, and not looking at all the identities that impact access to these things for women. And also for, like trans male, right? How do their access to if needed abortion looks like different for a cisgender woman, right? So I think that's why it's so important to deconstruct it and really look at it from all these other lenses.
Yeah, for sure. Something that I had thought about was gatekeeping. So you can be a gatekeeper when it comes to um, race and equity, religion, different positions of power, and you can especially be a gatekeeper when it comes to gender equity issues. And I see her in a gatekeeper role. So regardless of how her views are, she has the power to impact people regardless of how they view the world and what they want. So she could say that she's pro-choice, but she votes for pro-life, um, and that will affect all of these other women who economically they can't afford to have a child right now. Possibly they would be bringing the child into a violent home life, or they would be put into a situation where they are going to be a single parent and they don't have the bandwidth in order to be able to afford to do what they would need to do in order to have that other kid. So there's all of these different issues that I think that people need to be cognitive of, because of course it's great to have children if that's something that you want in your life, but at what cost do you make it mandatory for all women to have to have children? And it has to be mandatory, because I know that for me, for my choice, my personal choice, I don't want to have children at this time.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think it's important. Sorry, like I was just say like, even being a
no,
mother, I'm a mother, and right, and like it's like again, it goes back to like the choice. I made a choice to be a mother, but I can't then tell all women that that's the choice that they should also choose because, like my life is different. Like the access to resources that I have, lifestyle, all these things that play a role in those choices could look very different from some another woman. So like my choice, we can't just all base it on like gender, right? Like, oh well, as a woman, being like, is great. So you should want to be a mother too, because there's all these other layers to why people choose to have children or not.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I just completely agree with that, and that women should have this right to choose whether they want children or not, or how many children they want, or so on, because it's not right when someone tries to mandate them like this many kids you should have, or otherwise you're not worthy. And this topic is in my mind right now because in Hungary, um the not the prime minister, but like um the president said that women should, well, I'm trying to translate it from Hungarian, that it doesn't worth anything is a if a woman doesn't like keep giving birth. And birth, it's just, he made such a stupid expression, but anyways, he just said that like women need to give more and more birth, otherwise they're not worthy. And hearing that is insane, that like, and that's in Europe. So it's a tendency which is, I feel like, becoming stronger and stronger around the world, that they're trying to mandate what women can do with their bodies or what they should do. um how many like whether they, how many kids they should have, or otherwise they're not worthy, like this worth connected to motherhood, and like to help the demographic growth of a nation and stuff like that. I hear this from many, many places, and we can see how women's rights to choose, um, and abortion rights are being canceled, or I don't know how to say it, in many, many countries. And I am a mother of three children. I chose to have them, and I'll probably have more. And I'm a feminist, so I totally believe in the right to choose. And it's not right um, when, whether that be a government or anyone trying to like mandate for these women that this is what should they do with their bodies, with their choice to have children. So that's insane, but it's definitely a tendency I see all over the world. Like, yeah, if we mention this abortion bill, which has been signed by 31 countries, limiting the rights to abortion for women. I don't know if you two heard about that, but it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is very scary. I think that, it is really interesting when it comes to different laws and policies surrounding women's bodies as opposed to men's bodies. Don't, um, I don't see any policies coming forward about this is how many people you are allowed to sleep with because you have the possibility of spreading your sperm. That's just a thing. Like I don't know if there is anything, any sort of mandate that would ever happen when it comes to um, just birth control for men or something along those lines. I don't foresee that or stricter laws and policies when it comes to if a woman does actually conceive, how much is the man responsible for paying and making it mandatory. So these are just different,
Yeah.
yeah, areas.
No, it's interesting because I learned about it like from the origins of patriarchy. Like it has always been this like controlling female bodies. Because I don't know if you two heard this, but before that there were matriarchal societies, and they looked at women like these miracle goddesses who just create life, because at that time people didn't know the role of sperm in creating life. So they just thought like these women are these wonderful goddesses who just keep creating life, and they didn't know how, but they worshipped them and everything. And so when they discovered that sperm plays a role in it, that's when they started overthrowing that matriarchal word and replacing it with a very like aggressive patriarchal system, patriarchal orders, policing women's bodies. So all of these things connect, and these are still yeah, as you said, Tasha, like we don't talk much about like policing of men's bodies, right? Or male bodies, but we do talk a lot about like how we can police female bodies, and those are just all part of this patriarchal system. So yeah, I think that's how it connects.
I think that there's a problem with having Viagra covered on insurance and having birth control where you have to pay out of pocket. These are just different issues that I think women have to face on a day to day basis that men don't even have a lens for. It's not a concept because they haven't had to think about it. When it comes to, intersectionality, um, looking at it from a different perspective of being an affluent white male, as opposed to a person of color, who is at a different socioeconomic standing. There's a lot that goes into some of these policies that are going to be passed, and some of the policies that have already passed that are very disempowering for women and for people who identify as feminists.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I think part of how they continue pushing this narrative of like, abortion is shame, right? I mean, 1 in 4 women will have an abortion in their lifetime. And so that's a big number. But we usually don't know who these women are because this is not a topic that we tend to have because and it goes back to this shame, being ashamed of this thing, of a right to your own body. So it's not just about like the issue that other people can have a right to say what you can do with your body, but even that you must feel shame for the choices you make for yourself. I was watching this show, and it was specifically talking about abortion in Latin America and specifically in Mexico, and they were talking about how when in Mexico City they decriminalized, so they did a survey while abortion was criminalized, and the people that supported pro-choice were like lower, right? Let's say like they're only 30% supported pro choice and then 70 pro-life. But when they did this survey after they decriminalized it, those numbers shifted, and now more people were more willing to say, yes, I support, the right to choose. Because now that it's like something that is seen more as like a social issue that people are talking about, people feel more comfortable and it's not as taboo and shameful. Which I think is another huge part of like having these conversations is taking away that shame and that taboo so people don't feel ashamed to say, yes, I made this choice for myself. Just like if I decided to, you know, cut my hair, I don't have to explain why I cut my hair, right? Like that's my choice. And there's no shame in that. People usually wouldn't shame me for cutting my hair. So if I chose to have an abortion and I had to say it, like there should be no shame around that I made that choice for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 I agree. And I I think there are also many misconceptions about like abortion and how can abortion rates be how to say this, so how can there be less abortions, and then we can talk about like sex education and more access to birth control and all these things which would help. And especially these days I see many discussions about this, that like banning abortion will solve these issues, which is not true, but like um helping women to have more access to birth control and sex education could help in like prevent unwanted pregnancies, right? And what else wanted to say? Because I'm not like a big fan of abortion, but I believe in the right for women to choose. I just read a really interesting article from a friend who's also a member of the church I'm at, and she also said like, yeah, like she's not a big fan of abortion, but she totally believes in the right for women to choose. Like it's that a government shouldn't make a decision for them because um it's a very important decision for a woman if they decide that way, and we and she probably thought it through and discussed it with health professionals and whoever it is necessary, but ultimately it's their right to choose whether they want to carry that baby or not, and government shouldn't take that right away from them.
Yeah, I think similar to like, you know, defining being a feminist, right? Like people, the assumption is that you hate men. Oh, we don't hate like men. We hate patriarchal systems, right? I think the same thing, the misconception with being pro-choice is people assume that you, I mean, there's a lot of people that could be pro-choice and say, I wouldn't have an abortion, but I believe in the right for people to be able to choose whatever is best for them, right? And I think that that's also the misconception for a lot of people, that being pro-choice means that you are like I guess for lack of a better term, pro-abortion, right? But it's like being pro-choice means I support people's right to decide whatever they want to decide when it comes to their body. I'm not telling you to have an
Hmm.
abortion, right? I'm saying you do what's best for you. And I think that that's a huge misconception. And I think that's again the narrative that's pushed in regards to situations like that. Um, and again, when we have someone like Amy Barrett put in, in the court, and she is a woman, and she's saying she's pro-life, um, then people can use that and say, see, like women are pro-life. So like if they're pro-life, that means that abortion is wrong because women, it's another woman telling you what's right. And it's not the issue about a woman or a man telling you what's right or wrong. It's any individual should not have a right to tell you what you can and cannot do with your body. But I think that that is strategy, right? And that's why not all women empower mean that it's going to be a step forward for women, because sometimes women are used to continue upholding these patriarchal ideologies and then laws, right? By saying, well, look, it's a woman saying this, right? If a woman, this is a woman's perspective, then it must be right, right? It's not men pushing this, because I like that's a lot of the backlash, right? When we talk about like, well, men are making decisions, but then you make a move where you put a woman, and the woman's also making that decision. It's more excusable for to say it's not men, it's other women, and women know, right? She as a woman, she knows what it's like. But again, she every individual is their own self, and they have a right to decide. The government shouldn't decide for you what you can do.
Yeah. So, I mean, just thinking about that, there's so many different things that are happening right now, and just sort of looking at it from another lens. This frustration with wearing masks. Like, there's all these people who are like, you shouldn't be telling me what to do with my body. I shouldn't have to wear a mask if I don't want to. If you twist that around and you look at it from a perspective of a woman, the government should not have the right to be able to tell me what to do with my body when it comes to whether or not I'm going to produce a child. I have to live with that child for another 18 years and provide for that child. That, on average right now, minimum is $218,000. It takes about $10,000 minimum to actually deliver a child, and going through the hospital and all of that other stuff. So you are putting people in poverty. So just having that understanding that, this is not a public health issue. It's not something where if I am not doing this, am going to affect all of these other people. But there is a policy that if it is put in place, I might be in a position where I'm in a disempowered position. I don't get to make the decision as to whether or not I want to move forward. Maybe for me, because I'm a business owner, my focus is on my business and I want to put all my energy and my extra money into my business as opposed to putting it into a child that in my current state, I don't have the bandwidth or the mental focus in that area. So it would actually be a disadvantage to that child coming into the world where they have to deal with this parent who may or may not be in a space to actually give them all of the attention that they deserve. So when I think about, you know, pro-life, I think that it is really important for pro-life people to also be thinking about the life of the person who is delivering that child. What is their life going to be like? How is it going to be impacted? How is it going to change? There are so many different complications when it comes to pregnancy that there's a possibility that that person could have some sort of health issues afterwards. I had a friend who the doctor made the choice to do a C-section without her permission. And so her abs will not be the same for a very long time. And, you know, you could argue that, oh, well, she gets to do this, bring this beautiful baby into the world. And yeah, I'm sure she's very happy that she has this beautiful baby. I also believe that there are different ways that could have been handled so that she could have kept, you know, that for herself. And then instead now it has been a major health issue for her moving forward. So yeah, so those are just different things that I think about. I do think that it is really important for us to take all of this into consideration.
Yeah, and again, I think that this topic brought up again why it's so important to discuss like your feminist lens, because the three of us here have identify as feminists, right? Even though all three of us are pro-choice, we all have very different definitions of what that means for us, right? Like Rika, you said like I'm not a fan of it, but I also understand that I don't have a right to tell other people, what they should do with their body, right? And I mean, again, all pro-choice, but that's her description, her view on it. For you, Tasha, I know you're sharing like all these reasons why, right? Like we should look at this issue and understand why we shouldn't have a say. And for me, I have the perspective of like, I don't think women should even have to explain, right? Like they should just choose, like, because I think that also creates these like boxes of when is it okay or not, right? If you're married and with children, the assumption is like, well, you're married and you have kids, like, why would you have an abortion? Like, abortions should only like they're only okay when it's like someone that doesn't have like financial stability or is young or is this, right? Like, and I believe like I it's just a choice I'm making. I don't have to give an explanation, just like I don't have to give an explanation when I cut my hair of why I'm doing it. I shouldn't have to give an explanation. So again, why I think it's really important when we're having these conversations and deconstructing what being a feminist means and our perspective in different issues is that we can all be on the same side, but also have very different definitions of what that means for us. And being very aware of that is also really important, because I think that's when we can catch when we might be also upholding oppressive ideology, right? Might it be based on race, right? These assumptions we have a race or like gender. Um, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting topic. I would encourage everyone that's watching this to sit down with feminist friends and say, let's have a conversation about this topic and see if when you dissect the issue, if you all agree 100% or if you all have different perspective on the same topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree totally. And just talking about this abortion topic, like in some places these days, it goes really into the extreme. the ban on this, which really violate women's rights. Most feminists would agree with that. I think, like in Poland, there is almost a near total abortion ban. Like even if your baby wouldn't be viable out of the womb, you still have to give birth to the baby, and then I don't know, wait like 20 minutes or an hour for the baby to die because they know already in the womb that it won't be viable, but they have no choice to make it in that way too. And that's what an extreme situation that is. And it's crazy to see how in some ways the world is going backwards on like women's rights in many countries. So, and that's why there are the protests in Poland right now and the demonstrations and all those things, because really women have like zero right to choose at this point. Um, like even in situations like that, like even if someone is pro-life, they can understand like if a person is a victim of rape, or the baby wouldn't be viable, they still force these women to carry unviable pregnancies. And that's just, I think, for any normal person could see how that's insane. But still they put bans like that in modern countries in Europe. So to me that's just insane. It's like it just shows me that we have a really long way to go from like accepting that women have a right over their pregnancies and their bodies. So that's just very unreasonable bans we see all over the world right now, and it's very worrisome for women's rights. And yeah.
So, Reiki, you were
Definitely.
bringing up a really important topic just because, right now there are women out there who are on the streets. They're frustrated just because of all these different policies that are coming forward. I know that there's a lot of people in the United States who are very frustrated about what's the state of our nation is in. And there's people all over the world who are going through a lot when it comes to COVID and the pandemic. Um, what what are both of you doing when it comes to self-care so you can support yourself at this time? Just because I know that it is really frustrating and sometimes very polarizing. And if you don't do self-care, then you can definitely um, you can definitely shut down and not be as effective as you could be. Um, so yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, self-care is so important. So to me, because I read the news all the time, I'm often engaged on social media in discussions because I don't want to miss out. I want to know what's going on in the world, and I care about humans rights, I care about women's rights. And we really live in a time where something new happens every day in the United States and internationally as well, where something happens which violates human rights. And I really care about this stuff. And but it's hard if you just read about these things all the time and you get so caught up in it, because I realize then I'm frustrated. Sometimes I'm frustrated with my family as well, or when I spend time with them I just think about like how about the injustices in the world. And when I want to take time off from these things, I feel a kind of guilt. I feel some kind of guilt that like, but I need to like work on something. I need to at least like share a discussion about it or something, because I feel a guilt. It's also a privilege actually to that I can say that I can take time off from these things, in these injustices, and that would be fine for me because they like don't affect me directly. So it is a privilege. So yeah, so sometimes I feel guilt about this, but we also need to realize that if we're not taking the time to care for ourselves, like our anti-violence work or human rights work or whatever we do is less effective as well. Because if we cannot be there when we're needed fully, if we don't take care of ourselves, then it's hard to give. So that's my basic thought about self-care, Magdalena.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a conflicting relationship with the idea of self-care. I do think that it is a privilege, right? And I think it's also been like like I don't know what the right term, but like it's been like there's now this idea that we have to do self-care, right? And if we don't, like there's a sense of like responsibility for burnout, or like you're just not like doing things right, or you're not balancing your life. So it's putting that responsibility on folks. And I think for a lot of individuals, like self-care is not an option, right? Like for individuals that we see that have been protesting for, I mean, months, right? Self-care is not an option because it's between life and death for them, right? We see, um, I mean, for Black folks in America, right, in the US, like, how can you, do self-care when, Black people are being murdered on TV and, and all these things are happening? Um, so again, I have a conflicting feelings about it. I think it's also been, like, sold into, like, "Oh, I self-care, I take a bubble bath," right? And, like, and it's now it's being sold as this idea. So I mean, I obviously try to take care of myself, but there are situations where know that I don't have the privilege to take a step back and, turn off the TV, or not respond to certain things because people that need me and that it's a life or death situation or it's like, a crucial situation. Um, so what I think I consider self-care for me is because I also believe in community healing and collective healing is, having these conversations with my inner circle, people that will understand me, where I can be unapologetically myself and I don't have to explain why I feel the way I feel. And I know that I'm not going to be attacked or questioned. Um, so like the processing for me, processing feelings and thoughts is very important and very healing. So I constantly do that with friends. And again, some people might be like, that's not self-care. Like, like take a break. Don't talk about this issue anymore. Like if you had a long day, why have to relive it? But I mean, for me, it gives me a brave space where I could be my authentic self and process this information. And move forward then however I need to.
So yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying as far as how it's like, oh, take a bubble bath, or oh, do this for self-care. And I think self-care really looks different for different people. Um, I've really talked to a lot of my clients with the empowerment coaching to just ask yourself, what do I need right now? And obviously, there are certain things where it's like, oh, I want a massage, or I want this, I want that. Like, maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you can't, um, you don't have time, you don't have energy or bandwidth, or maybe that's just not even a scope. But maybe what you need right now is a glass of water. What you need is to call a friend. What you need is to eat something because you realize that you've been on the go, or that you've been out there protesting and you've had 10 hours that you just haven't eaten. So, really making sure that you are taking the extra time to actually do that for yourself, because when you do that for yourself, you're able to show up and be present, fully present for either your work or what you're passionate about. If you are out there and doing protester work, because these topics are things that you're passionate about and believe in, how can you do that to the best of your ability while also not neglecting yourself? Um, because I think that, especially what I've noticed about other self defense practitioners, is we're all about the cause. We care so much and so deeply about people that we are willing to give our time, our energy. A lot of I can't tell you how many hours that I have volunteered and or done this work and done it for free. And I've been doing this work for 18 years and still I'll have people who are like, do you do this work for free? And now luckily I've gotten to a point where I'm like, no, I don't do this work for free. It's very disempowering for you to ask me to do this work for free. So it's just really interesting when we are talking about self-care. What are certain things that we can do to honor ourselves in that moment, in that time? Um, I haven't I haven't done any sort of purchases in the last 6 months other than food, just because I wanted to make sure that basic needs were met. And then yesterday I ended up getting my nails done. I was really excited about it. And then suddenly I started feeling guilty of like, oh my God, I should have done this with the money. I could have done that with the money. And then one of my friends was like, just enjoy it. Just be excited for a little bit and not feel guilty that you ended up using that money to go and get your nails done. It's like, okay, I'm going to take this time. I'm going to appreciate it. Um, so so just understanding that you're very deserving and you're deserving of even the littlest of things. And maybe that's to sit down, maybe that's to get water, maybe that's to go eat. Um, you deserve to be heard. So maybe when it comes to self care, if you need to vent about all of these things that are happening in the world to people who actually get it, yeah, that's self care. That's awesome. Um, so, really understanding that self care doesn't have to look like a bubble bath with flowers and all these other things. Self care can be calling your mom. I call my mom and my dad every single day, and I consider that a time of self care. So just opening up your scope when it comes to self care. Reika, I loved that you had done sort of an unplug thing for a little bit. Um, and that, to me, that looked like self-care because there's so many different things in the news. We're being over inundated. It's a really hard time with grappling for a lot of women with what's happening, and a lot of our rights are being infringed upon. And so it is really important for us to be able to come together and gather and speak. Um, but yeah, those are just different things that I think about when it comes to self care is just what do I need? How can I give that to myself, even if it's little?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, what that unplugged thing, sometimes I decide to take breaks from like social media when it gets like really overwhelming. And that can be a form of self-care as well, like maybe taking a break from something we do every day, what needs a lot of our emotional and mental labor, and just do that. Take a break from whatever you need to feel better. Yeah.
Great. As per usual, it was great to have this conversation with y'all, and I'm excited for our next
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, thank you to both
Me
of
too.
you. Just really appreciate your time and your perspective and everything because you bring a lot to the table, the Empowerment Roundtable. So I look forward to the next episode and I'm excited. And yeah, both of you take care and aloha.
Yeah. Aloha.